I should never have married an old woman like you. Younger women are definitely better. I can't even walk with you in public. You're so embarrassing. If I could, I'd go back in time and start my life over. These were the words my ex-husband Holden said to me 12 years ago. My name is Aloan, and I'm now 50 years old. I married Holden when I was 35, and he was 5 years younger than me. At the time, I worked as a nurse in a hospital, and that's where I met Holden. He was a new doctor just finishing his residency, and he asked me questions about different things at work. I found his innocence kind of cute and couldn't help but guide him. But I was just a nurse, and he was a doctor, and on top of that, I was older. I didn't think about dating him at first. But he kept talking to me almost every day, and I couldn't ignore him. Eventually, we started dating. Naturally, I worried about the age gap, but Holden didn't seem to mind, so I stopped worrying too. After 2 years of dating, we got married. But after 5 years of being married, he started treating me badly, saying he should have married someone younger. He would flirt with the younger nurses at work, but I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone, so I tried to ignore it. One day, I found out he was cheating on me. The other woman was a former patient. I didn't know her because I worked in a different department, but she was 12 years younger than me. Holden didn't hide anything. He said, "No wonder we couldn't have kids. You're too old. My girlfriend is pregnant with my baby." Holden laughed as if cheating was normal. I couldn't take it anymore, so I agreed to a divorce. Of course, I told him I would be asking for alimony, and that made him furious. "I was married to you for 5 years, and you want alimony? I should be the one getting paid." He yelled at me angrily. It seemed he didn't expect me to ask for alimony after his affair. I even got a call from his father, who didn't care that Holden had cheated. His father said, "It's natural for a young man to be attracted to a younger woman." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Holden refused to pay alimony, so I had to talk to a lawyer. There was no way I could just let it go after everything he did and said. The lawyer told me I had the right to ask for alimony, so I left it to them. People often say that divorce is harder than getting married, and I truly felt that. But thanks to my lawyer, I was able to get alimony, cancel the lease on our apartment, and move into my own place. I also changed my last name back to my maiden name, Britton. The only good thing was that Holden moved to another hospital. "I wouldn't want to work with an old hag like you," he said as his last words to me. He probably thought that divorcing me and marrying his girlfriend right away wouldn't cause problems for him, but I was surprised at how fast he had found a new job. Still, people talk. I heard whispers about how I was left by my younger husband, and I felt like everyone was looking at me. It started to get to me, and I became paranoid, thinking someone was always gossiping about me. In the end, I quit my job at the hospital too. I spent some time doing nothing for a while. But since I love working, I decided to look for a new job. Luckily, I found a small maternity clinic near my new home that was hiring nurses, and I got the job right away. It was a small place with only a few doctors and nurses, but everyone was friendly and I liked working there. "Miss Britton, you're very good at what you do, and the patients love you," my boss told me. I was happy, but my peace didn't last long. One day, a pregnant woman was referred to our clinic from another hospital. When I saw her name, I froze. Her name was Sarah Evans, the same name as Holden's girlfriend. I checked again to see if it was really her. Was it just a coincidence? Her husband's name was Holden, and he was a doctor too. It didn't take long for me to realize that her husband was my ex-husband, Holden. The hospital where Holden worked didn't have an obstetrics department, and since they had recently moved nearby, they were referred to our hospital. I had gone back to using my maiden name after the divorce, so she didn't recognize me. I never thought I would meet them here. I didn't tell anyone that she was Holden's mistress or that she was the reason for my divorce. I kept quiet, pretending it was no big deal. But one day, Holden came with his wife for her checkup. The moment he saw me, his eyes widened in shock. He probably didn't expect to see me working at the same hospital. I didn't want to meet him here either. "What are you doing here?" Holden said, clearly annoyed. His wife, Sarah, looked confused at first, but then her expression changed. She figured out who I was. "Wait, is she asked. Then, with a mean look, she added, "Did you come here just to harass us?" "Of course not," I replied, trying to stay calm. I've been working here for a while. There's no way I would have known Holden was coming here, but Holden didn't believe me. He glared at me and accused me of following them. You're stalking me, aren't you? You're just trying to make my life difficult. Don't be ridiculous. Why would I do that? I said, frustrated. You're a greedy woman. You squeezed money out of me after I left you because you're old. Who knows what you'll do next? Holden shouted at me in the middle of the examination room. Everyone was watching now. I could feel their stares, and it made me uncomfortable, even though I knew Holden was the one in the wrong. Sarah, adding fuel to the fire, pretended to cry and said, "Oh, I'm so scared. I don't know what she might do. What if something happens to my babies?" Holden turned to the doctor and demanded, "Please don't let her get anywhere near my wife. I can't trust her." The doctor in charge asked me to step out of the room. I knew they didn't think I was dangerous, but it seemed like the only way to calm things down was for me to leave. I felt embarrassed and miserable as I walked out. Even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone around me was judging me. The whispers and glances made me feel like they were talking about my divorce behind my back. To make things worse, Sarah continued coming to the hospital for her appointments and badmouthed me every time. She would make passive-aggressive comments that were hard to ignore. She knew how to play the victim, and nobody wanted to upset her, especially since she was pregnant. The staff and doctors couldn't say anything to her because they didn't want to cause stress that might affect her pregnancy. So I had to put up with it. It became harder for me to stay in that hospital. Even though it was a good job, and I liked working there, the atmosphere had changed. I didn't want to spend the next 6 months in such a toxic environment while Sarah continued her pregnancy. So I decided to quit. I handed in my resignation. The director of the hospital seemed sad to see me go, but I also sensed some relief on his face. I felt like I was being punished for something that wasn't my fault. Tired and emotionally drained, I couldn't bring myself to search for another hospital job. Instead, I decided to return to my parents' home in the countryside. My parents welcomed me with open arms and didn't ask any questions. At first, I just stayed at home, not doing much. But after a while, I started feeling guilty about doing nothing. So, I decided to take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. It was a new experience for me since I had always worked in hospitals. But it was refreshing, and I enjoyed the change of pace. Being a nurse was fulfilling, but it was also a huge responsibility. Every day, I had to be on high alert because I was responsible for people's lives. It was emotionally exhausting. Working at the supermarket was different. It wasn't as stressful, and it gave me a break from the intense pressure I had been under as a nurse. 3 years after moving back home, the supermarket offered me a full-time position. My hard work had been recognized, and I was happy to accept. It felt good to be appreciated. For years later, something unexpected happened. A matchmaker approached me. "Are you interested in trying an arranged marriage?" she asked. I was taken aback. "Excuse me? I have just the right person for you," said the store manager with a big smile. I wasn't expecting this. At 47, I didn't have any plans of getting married again, so I politely said no. But the manager wouldn't give up easily. She explained that the man she had in mind was 49 years old, just 2 years older than me. He had also been through a tough divorce, just like me, because his wife had cheated on him 22 years ago. We had that in common. After hearing her out, I couldn't refuse anymore, so we agreed to meet. Given our ages, we decided to meet directly without involving any middlemen. We picked a nice restaurant, and when I arrived, I noticed he was already there. As soon as I entered the room, he quickly stood up to greet me. But in his rush, he bumped his forehead against the table. "Ouch," he said, rubbing his head, his face turning red. I couldn't help but laugh. It was like something straight out of a comedy. I hadn't expected something like this to happen on a first meeting. "Hi, I'm Jackson," he said shyly, still rubbing his head. "Thank you for coming today." I smiled. "Nice to meet you, I'm Aloan." Because of that little accident, the tension between us quickly melted away. We felt comfortable with each other right from the start. As we talked, I learned more about him. To my surprise, the reason for this arranged meeting was that he had fallen for me at first sight. He had seen me at the supermarket when he was in town on a business trip and asked the manager, who happened to be his college senior, to set us up. "I'd like to have a serious relationship, if possible," Jackson said. He looked sincere. I had come to the meeting thinking I would refuse, but something changed. Instead of saying no, I found myself wanting to see him again. And so, we began dating. After 6 months of seeing each other, we decided to get married. Both of my parents really liked him. They said he had a great personality and were genuinely happy for us. I felt lucky to have found someone like Jackson. He always thought about me, and living with him felt like a true blessing. We both agreed from the beginning that we didn't want children, given our age. We just wanted to live a peaceful life together. But when I turned 50, something unexpected happened. I started feeling unwell. I thought I was sick, so I went to the hospital for a checkup. To my surprise, the doctor told me I wasn't sick. I was pregnant. I couldn't believe it. I never thought I'd get pregnant at this age, and I hadn't even considered that my SYMP Holden's might be morning sickness. When I told Jackson, I was nervous. "It seems like there's a baby," I said. "That's great. So, who's the lucky one? Do I know them?" Jackson joked, not realizing what I was trying to say. I laughed and replied, "Yes, you do. The baby's right in front of you. I'm pregnant." Jackson froze, his face puzzled. He didn't say anything for a moment, then he looked down at my belly. "Our baby?" he asked slowly. I nodded. "Yes, our baby." His eyes grew wide in shock. It was clear that this was the last thing he had expected. I mean, even I was still trying to process the news. "So, we're going to be parents?" he asked. "Yes, it seems like it," I said, smiling. "Wow," Jackson exclaimed, sounding more surprised than ever. He hugged me tightly. "This is unbelievable. It's a miracle." It really was a miracle, but it also came with its own worries. I started to wonder if it was safe for me to give birth at my age. I knew that having a baby at an older age had its risks, not just for me, but for the baby too. Even the doctors asked me what I wanted to do, implying that I had a choice. There were a lot of things to think about. I knew people would ask questions like, "How old will you be when your child turns 22? Those thoughts made me nervous, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to raise a child at this stage of my life. But despite my worries, I couldn't bring myself to end the pregnancy. "What are you talking about?" "Of course, we're having this baby," Jackson said, without any hesitation. His words made me happy because I could tell he meant it, but as time passed, he also started to worry about my health. We talked a lot about the possible risks and decided to go ahead with the pregnancy. We spoke to our doctor, who explained everything to us, and we made sure to take all the necessary precautions. Both of our parents were shocked when we told them, but they were also happy for us. We chose to give birth at a large, well-equipped hospital. The doctors were very supportive and kind, which made me feel a little more at ease. On the day of one of my checkups, my husband couldn't come with me because of a work commitment, so I went alone. When I entered the examination room, I couldn't believe my eyes. There, standing in front of me, was my ex-husband, Holden. Of all the places I could have run into him, I never thought it would be here, at this hospital. "Beckett, seriously, you're the 50-year-old pregnant woman?" Holden burst out laughing when he saw me in the examination room. The obstetrician and the nurse looked confused, but Holden didn't care. He kept laughing, acting like it was the funniest thing in the world. "You have no right to say that to me," I said, trying to stay calm. But Holden just kept going. "I'm worried about you, an old lady getting pregnant at your age. That's just gross." I was already feeling nervous about my pregnancy, and hearing those words made me feel worse. "Are you really a doctor?" I asked, shocked by his rude behavior. "What are you acting all high and mighty for?" Holden snapped. "Most of the patients at this hospital are rich. Do you even get that? You should leave before you embarrass yourself." I took a deep breath and said, "Excuse me, Dr. Evans." I was leaving anyway. I wouldn't dream of giving birth at a hospital with a doctor like you. "Yeah, get out of here," Holden sneered, still thinking he had the upper hand. But then the nurse turned to him and said, "Dr. Evans, that woman is the wife of the heir to the Leora Group, one of the biggest donors to this hospital." "What?" Holden's face went pale. He clearly had no idea who I was or who my husband was. You might not know since you're new here, but her family has made large donations to this hospital, the nurse added. Holden tried to say something, but I cut him off. I have no connection to you, Holden. What you just said to me was terrible, and I can't believe a doctor would say such things to a patient. At that moment, my husband walked into the room. Sorry I'm late, he said, but as soon as he saw my face and noticed Holden's pale expression, he knew something was wrong. What's going on? My husband asked, looking from me to Holden. I took a deep breath and said, This doctor, Dr. Evans, just told me that giving birth at 50 is disgusting. My husband's expression changed instantly. He knew I had been married to a man named Holden before, and he put two and two together. Are you Dr. Evans? Did you insult my wife? Holden stammered, trying to explain himself, but my husband cut him off. What kind of hospital is this where a doctor insults a patient? I can't trust my wife and unborn child in a place like this. Just then, the nurse who had left earlier returned with the hospital director. I heard there was a problem, the director said, looking at Holden. My father recommended this hospital, but now I'm starting to think we chose the wrong place, my husband said, clearly upset. The director looked shocked. I'm so sorry for this. I had no idea this man was like this. He's not one of our regular doctors. What do you mean? Holden asked, panicking. Director, what are you saying? I just fired you, the director said firmly. I didn't know you would act like this. I only hired you because your father asked me as a favor, but we don't need a doctor who speaks like this to our patients. Wait, what? You can't do this. Holden shouted, but the obstetrician quickly stepped in and dragged him out of the room, despite his protests. No. Why? The director apologized over and over for the situation. He looked so sorry that we almost felt bad for him. My husband sat down beside me, but his anger still hadn't gone away. Did you fire him because of my father's donations? Or would you have kept him if that wasn't the case? The director shook his head. No, I would have fired him no matter what. He's only been here for a week, and I never imagined he'd behave this way. It turned out that Holden had only been at the hospital for a short time. His father, who was a friend of the director, had begged him to hire Holden after a recent reunion. The director was genuinely surprised by Holden's behavior and apologized again. Not all the doctors here are like him. Our obstetrician is one of the best, and I hope you'll consider staying. My husband and I agreed that the other doctors seemed good, and I felt reassured. My father-in-law, who is the president of a major company with branches all over the country, had donated to this hospital because his wife, my mother-in-law, was treated here for a serious illness when she was younger. That's why my father-in-law recommended this hospital for my pregnancy. A few days later, we received a call from Holden. He was begging us to talk to the director and get him rehired. Please, if you ask, they might reconsider, Holden said. It turned out he had a history of making patients angry with his arrogant attitude, and he had been moving from hospital to hospital because of it. His father had warned him that if he got fired again, his future as a doctor would be over. But Holden still hadn't learned his lesson. When the call came, my husband took the phone from me. He was furious and yelled at Holden. If you ever contact us again or come near my wife, I'll report you to the police for harassment. That was the last time we ever heard from Holden. He was probably too scared to try again. Not long after that, on the way home from one of my hospital visits, we stopped by a convenience store. To my surprise, we saw Holden working there. He had lost his job at the hospital, and no other place would hire him anymore. He told us, with tears in his eyes, that his wife and child had left him. But I didn't feel any sympathy for him. I just decided that I would never visit that store again. The following year, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She is so adorable, and we love her more than anything. No matter what happens, I am determined to raise her with all the love and care she deserves. My husband has been completely smitten with her since the moment she was born. He's turning into a very indulgent father, so I have to make sure he doesn't spoil her too much.